Welcome, everyone. I'm Susan Chapman, Director of Member Services for the Tri-Societies. With me is Ann Jorce, Vice President of ASTA and representing ASTA's Management Skills and FUSE committees. We're pleased to have you on the fourth in our new webinar series titled Leadership, Taking It to the Next Level. This series is designed to provide you with useful information and insights into the management and administration roles you may currently be in or are moving towards. The series is a collaboration between ASA, CSSA, SSSA, and ASTA. There's just a few notes before we begin. You're welcome to ask questions via the chat box on the lower right of your screen. There are two options for posting the question or comment, to all audience members or just to the organizer. So be sure to select either option from the drop-down in the chat section. To keep the flow of the webinar, we'll answer questions at the end of the presentation. After the webinar, you'll receive a feedback survey. Please take a few minutes to give us your thoughts. This is our inaugural webinar series, so all feedback is welcome and will help us build the program. And now, I'll turn it over to Jonathan Shaver of Envision Partners, who will be our moderator.
Thank you, Susan. Welcome everyone to the fourth webinar in the series, Taking It to the Next Level. My name is Jonathan Shaver from Envision Partners, a leadership development company focused on advancing the career and impact of high potential leaders in our agricultural industry. I am an associate member of the American Seed Trade Association and member of the Management Skills Committee. The American Seed Trade Association works on behalf of the seed industry to promote the research, development, and movement of quality seed to meet the world's demand for food, feed, fiber, and fuel. Today's webinar is The Art of Delegation, and today we have two speakers from RiceTec. Our first speaker, Oswaldo Lopez, is RiceTec's Global Lead for Human Resources, a position he assumed when he joined RiceTec in 2012. Oswaldo is responsible for setting the strategy and direction for RiceTec's human resources around the world, including workforce planning, organizational development, compensation, health and safety, and community outreach. Oswaldo has 20 years of international human resources experience, including 10 in the agriculture industry. He currently serves as a member of the Management Skills Committee for ASTA as well. Oswaldo earned his BA and MBA from Mexico's Tecnológico de Monterrey and executive training from Cornell, Purdue, and Stanford. Also joining us today from RiceTec is Traci LaChance. Having joined RiceTec in 2009, she is the U.S. production lead. In this role, Traci is responsible for setting the strategy, along with the business and operations objectives for RiceTec's production and manufacturing operations in the entire U.S. This includes the people, processes, and safety initiatives for this department. A key focus of her work is to work with the business to maximize planning tools that match the business supply and demand. Contingency planning, financial analysis, scenario planning are the foundation to Traci's department. Traci has been in the seed and production manufacturing industry for 25 years professionally, the BA in marketing. We have a great deal to learn today from Oswaldo and from Traci. I ask you to prepare yourself to listen, to capture your thoughts and questions. We'll save plenty of time at the end for those comments and questions. So at this time, Oswaldo, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being part of this webinar, which Traci and I have the honor to deliver to all of you guys. As part of RiceTec, as members of this company, we're proud to work in the agriculture and make this place that we call world a better place. There's some information about RiceTec on your screen, and you are more than welcome to go and take a look into our webpage, ricetec.com, to see what we're doing for the ag business. Moving to what we're here today, we have prepared an agenda in which we want to share the knowledge or our understanding about what is delegation. First, we're going to be talking about why we need to delegate, or why delegation is part of our leadership skills, and a definition that is the bold, plain definition of delegation. After, we're going to be talking about the key principles of delegation. What are the key things that we have to consider before practicing the exercise of delegation? Third, Traci is going to be taking over to talk about what are the individual and team capabilities to be considered when delegating. Finally, we're going to be closing with a do's and don'ts, which is kind of like a small piece of advice to keep on the back of the head when we're delegating. And lastly, we're going to have an opportunity to have questions and hope we are able to answer and clarify your doubts. Feel free to do it at the end of the show. So before we start, I would like to run a first poll to kind of like sense who you are and where we are and why here. Poll number one is, how would you like to rate your current delegation skills? You have three options. You don't have a lot of experience, some experience, or you feel confident. That will give us a chance to understand where we are. Jonathan is going to provide us.
Yep, so we've got lots of great results coming in, Oswaldo. And we got about 80% of the folks voted really fast. So this is kind of what they look like. We've got about 25% of our group don't have a lot of experience in delegation. About 25% of our group feel really confident yet interested in additional tools. And about half of the group has some experience. They just need to improve their skills. It's probably not very surprising, because once you try it, then you realize that's pretty hard to do.
And I surely agree with Joe and with you, John, in that delegation, as our title says, is an art. And art requires a lot of practice, a lot of understanding the environment, understanding the context. And as that image that I place as a painter's palette, it is not easy to do and is always changing. So the first piece is why we delegate. We talk about the word, but delegation in leadership roles is not an option. It's just part of your leadership skills. It's one of those multiple skills that you need to have as a leader in order to perform your job. So bottom line, there is no option. It's just part of your leadership skills along with other ones. So for a definition, we can find multiple definitions across the board. But if we can make it simple, definition is delegation is the assignment of any responsibility. We can call it task, we can call it initiative, a project, whatever, to another person or persons, could be a team, to carry specific activities. It's practically an input with an output. And the input is the delegation. Now, I was able to pull a couple of quotes from two individuals that you might know or know about them. And Bill Gates describes delegation as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. And his quote is implicitly saying that it is a must of any leader to have an effective exercise to delegate. And the second one is from our former General Patton. People that is not very enthusiastic about wars, maybe not be very happy with this quote, but the other is, I have a personal appreciation for him on his way he was leading the troops. And he said, don't tell people how to do things, tell them what to do and let them surprise you with the results. This is something that in our modern world, we call it avoid micromanaging others. So as we can see, delegation is everywhere. It's not just for companies, it's not just for the Army, it happens anywhere. Now, talking about the principles. Delegation, at the end of the day, is a balance, and this is what I call the principle number one, is making the right balance between the task and the capabilities. What I refer as a task is, the type of activity, the timing, the expected outcome, and the capabilities is what the individual or the team and resources are available to conduct and perform that activity and that outcome. So that's the first principle, is a balance. The next one is what happens if the task is heavier than the capabilities. And I was trying to put here an example that we might have in our industry, and I put it here more in our seed industry. And I put, we have to harvest 5,000 acres in 2 days. It's challenging. It's a hard task, but it's doable. But if you delegate that function to only 2 employees or only 2 team members that maybe in a junior level, this is the first time they do it, or the second time they do it, or they have some level of experience, but not enough to manage this large volume. And on top of that, they have limited or not the best resources, could be an all combined. What is going to happen is most likely that will result in failure. Okay? So is the fault of having too much to do, or is the fault of the employees who were not prepared, or is a combination of both? So practically under this scenario is a combination of both, in which priorly making this decision or this delegation to these 2 particular individuals, the manager and the leader should make a good assessment about what are the individuals going to be able to do with the knowledge they have, with the resources they have, against what I'm asking to do. On the opposite, the next principle is the inefficiency side. Now we have to harvest very small amount of acres. We have more days to do it, and the persons are senior level, very experienced, actually a larger amount of people to do it, with much better equipment. Will they be successful? Surely they will be successful. Maybe they will even finish this task in a shorter period of time. What is going to happen is we're not going to be using our resources effectively. We will be inefficient. So this is the other side of the example with these principles of balance. What I want to deliver on these past 3 slides is delegation is not only an exercise between one person to another delivering or requesting to deliver a specific task or a specific activity. Delegation, it has 1 or 2 steps back in which the leader have to make an assessment in order to be successful, how to balance the outcome with the input, which is, from my perspective, one of the most important things to do before moving forward into delegating something to someone. For the next poll, and from this to jump with Traci's on Traci's section, I would like to know from all of you, what are those constraints that you have on delegating? I mean, it is that it requires too much time, and as I described before, will require time. that assessment is not necessarily easy to do. It requires time, it requires observation, will require a resource analysis. It's not easy. Okay. The other one, we're concentrated too much and do what is been asked for me to do, my own outcome, my own performance. The other one, I'm not sure because I don't know the projects to keep or to delegate. Could be another one. Going back to the assessment is what can be realistically delegated to someone or to be successful. The last one, I attempt to delegate, however, I haven't mastered it, which might be the case of most of us. We delegate as nature, especially if we have responsibility of a group, of a team. We delegate on a daily basis, but we have not mastered it yet. So John, as soon as you get the responses, we will be happy to help.
This is a great question. I wish I could answer this one, and I'm looking forward to each one of them. All right, so answers are coming in a little more slowly because my guess is people are balancing. Oswaldo, which one to choose? Because these are all reasons that make delegation difficult.
Well, I can tell I can apply all of them with me.
Right. With about 75% of the vote in here, the top one at about 62% right now is concerned that the work will not be done as well as I would do it. And then the rest are pretty equal here. The training requires too much time. Not sure if I know which projects to keep or delegate, prioritizing, or the experience of having attempted to delegate, they haven't quite mastered it yet.
You know, I am not surprised about the level of response on the answer number 2, that concern the work will not be done as well as I do it. I have experience, and I'm honored to work in this industry because I constantly see people trying to run the extra mile, raise the bar, do the best that we can. And for those who are in the city industry, that's our way of life. We need to improve, we need to innovate, we need to do better new things to keep this industry moving. So no wonder that it's hard to delegate when you are not necessarily sure if the person you're delegating is going to be having the same success that you've been having in the past. So when I was writing into this presentation, I realized that delegation is also some level of a risk management type of activity. You have to manage risk. A couple of days before, I was talking with Traci and say, Traci, let's put an example. You have 10 crops for this season. We are starting to plant. Our planting season is short. Our planting window is a couple of weeks. And you have to plant 5,000 acres with limited resources. But you already know which is the crop or the crops that you can't afford to fail. For those ones who you can't afford to fail, delegated those ones that you know that they are reliable, that they are going to be successful, that they have the higher chances to be successful. On those other crops that if things do not go well, you can afford not to be on 100%. That's where you delegate it to those employees who you might think that they are not ready yet, but they can learn from this exercise and potentially be successful. So in delegation, in this assessment, or when we are evaluating the task, we have to evaluate those tasks that are non-negotiable to be unsuccessful. and play with the risk. If you have a large group, then you start playing with your cards, and you have a small group, yeah, sometimes we have to do it ourselves. But then you will know what you have to do yourself and not everything. One of the most difficult things to accept or to manage or to master as a leader is to identify which out of the 10,000 things that I have to do, which ones are the ones that I can afford to fail. Those ones, you let them, sometimes let it happen. But the ones that you can't afford to fail, you take it and embrace it, and then you delegate it to the best person or the best team available. Okay? Hope this piece of advice works. Now, I'm gonna let Traci go into the fun piece. Traci, she was raised and born in a farm. She knows this business better than I do and better than many people I know. And I invited her to provide her expertise and her real life examples on what is delegation of. She manages a very large group of people responsible of both production in the field and production on the plant. And surely we will enjoy her conversation. Traci, this is yours.
Thank you, Oswaldo. I want to make a comment back to the poll results. I agree with Oswaldo that I was too expecting that the highest percentage would show that people are fearful that the work's not going to be done as well as they personally do it. To me, that just shows that I fall in that group as well. But I think it shows that we're all very high ownership leaders, and we care about the work being done correctly, on time, hitting deadlines, and producing high results. So with that in mind, that's a little bit how I've structured the next part of what we're going to talk about. And, you know, just because we've invested a lot of time in a project or something that we identify as, you know, something that we own, just because we pass it off to someone else does not mean that we've lost control, nor does it mean that the project won't be done as good, if not better. So let's talk a little bit about some looking at our employees and really jumping into how do we actually delegate and what does that look like. So this first chart, when delegating, I think it's important to define your expectation. That means to me that if you communicate properly, delegation can be a tool to achieve a variety of goals. It can be an opportunity to help an employee grow. It can be an opportunity to utilize someone's skill set that they may be proficient in an area. Maybe you just want to disperse the workload, which that then results in an increase in productivity. Any of these expectations contribute to building a culture where the employee feels like their work is contributing to the larger good. I found that once you've communicated this expectation, you're working towards growing a culture of teamwork and inclusivity. So what you see in this model is it focuses on what people know, what they've done, what people can do, and who they are. So let's jump into these quadrants just a little bit deeper. Let's now start with knowledge. Okay, so with knowledge, this is not only should we consider what our employees know, but how people learn. So learning behaviors can be divided up into two groups, natural and learned. Natural learners pick things up fast. They have their own thoughts, visions, and they require little guidance. Those are the people that you can hand something to, tell them your expectation. Say, this is what the objective of this project is. This is how it fits in the big picture, and what your desired outcome is. And they can take the ball and they can then go use their skill set and their knowledge and their tools to execute that job. With a learned behavior, that requires more training than others. Some want to be shown the process. They may need to gather more details before jumping in. They surely will ask more questions. So I have both of these types of employees in my group, and I have to be able to know what my people know, how they learn, and then I need to adjust my communication style to each type to make sure that I'm communicating clearly and they understand exactly. If I take the time to explain the process, the desired outcome, and how the process fits in the bigger picture, then we're going to have a better success rate that the delegation is going to go seamlessly. In this step, this goes back to some of the quotes that Oswaldo used earlier. In this step, I like to empower my employees to make suggestions on how they would do it, what changes they see that could be beneficial to the process. People don't like being told what to think, and a fresh set of eyes is always a good process improvement. So if we trust our employees enough that we would even consider for them to do the job that we've delegated to them, then we should respect and trust their intelligence and see what they have to offer to bring back to us. Pursuit of knowledge is vitally important for a business or an employee to grow. Now let's go to experience. And experience, obviously, your knowledge grows with more experience. We live in an era that we like everything fast and quick and now. However, experience requires time in literally doing the work. How do we gain experience? Through successes, failures, mistakes, misses, achievements, process improvements, and the list goes on and on. But ultimately, it takes time to learn and to grow and to improve our processes. As leaders, one of our many responsibilities to our employees and organization is to build more leaders. If we invest our time in training our employees, then we can take the time and the commitment to help them become better employees. This goes back to, are we sure? This goes back to the poll. Will the work be done as well as we had done it? If we do the hard work up front and we train and we spend that time with them, then I think our success rate would be higher. So in kind of applying that to who we are and what we do, in production, I don't have the luxury of doing a job when we have time. As many of you in the ag industry knows, that we have very hard deadlines. We have deadlines in getting seed to the customer and the time and the fashion that they've required. We have constraints in the field, weather, equipment, resources. So it's very, very important that everyone in the supply chain knows how they are contributing to the deliverable, and experience and knowledge is key to make sure that process is executed. On the other side, what happens when a manager won't let go and delegate? What message does this send to the employee? And I think we should think about that for a minute and just consider that from our own perspectives. At some point in our career, we've all been on the other side, that a manager, you know that you could take that job on, you know that you could help improve the process, yet someone's not willing to hand that over to you. I'm not saying that's an answer that we're gonna discuss today, but I think that as a leader, those kind of questions are ones that we should ask ourselves. Also, it falls in what's the worst thing that could happen? And that goes back to what Oswaldo said earlier. You know, if it's critically important, then maybe we need to have steps within the process of the delegation to make sure that the failure rate isn't as high. Let's go now to competencies. To me, this goes back to your expectation. You want to put your employees in positions that they can be successful. I obviously couldn't ask anyone to just operate a combine or run the machinery in the seaplane if they don't have any knowledge. So actually, if they don't have any knowledge, experience, or the competencies to do the job. Think about the safety competencies needed to run the machinery. We have to be very, very intentional in how we allocate our resources, which it comes in money, energy, people, and time. Competencies can include how well your employee is in a team setting. It can be how realistic are they in setting a goal? How are their interpersonal skills? How are their written communication skills? Are they creative? Are they flexible? Are they diplomatic? Do they have empathy? And in a team setting, this is really important to know your dynamics and know your expectation. So the list of competencies is endless. It's what we have listed here. It's how can you manage those soft skills? How can you set the bar that fits in with what their knowledge and skill set is? The key to develop these skills is to coach and mentor your employees in areas of deficiencies. And you know that's not always easy. So the challenge of a leader is to model, we're to teach, we're to coach, and then we're to measure our successes and failures, and then be willing to start the whole process again and either help that employee or restructure the delegation. And then finally, we have personal attributes. So with personal attributes, we tend to celebrate survival. It's those moments when we've worked long hours, we're in season, and we get to the finish line and we say, gosh, I made it through that. You know, but however, if we use better planning and delegation skills, maybe it wouldn't have felt as much as a sprint. And maybe as a manager, you wouldn't leave that experience or that moment in time or that project just exhausted physically and mentally. So again, back to the poll earlier, for managers that struggle with delegation, it can be to the point that they never delegate and they stay stagnant. I find the title of this webinar spot on. Delegation is an art. It's a skill set, because for those managers that fear the work won't be performed, as well as if they aren't personally doing it themselves, or if they just feel that they can't invest the time in training, they get stuck in the same cycle. However, if you can master your delegation skills, it can be a win-win situation for the manager, the employee, and the business. I attended a session on motivator differences, meaning each of us are motivated in a different way. As a leader, it's important for us to know these characteristics in our employees. I've delegated projects thinking I was helping an employee grow, however, all they felt was overwhelmed. I need to be able to pick up on those instances and adjust accordingly. Most employees want to know the work they are doing is important and impactful to the business. This is a great motivation tool when you tap into these conversations. So that's where I encourage you to motivate the task. Again, back to the beginning of communicate well. What is their expectation? What is the expectation of the process? And then use their knowledge on how they learn, what their experiences are, and their competencies, and play on that skill set. Sometimes leaders have to learn to be smaller, so others have to get large, so others can be larger. And I think that that's a difficult process, but delegation has the potential to build and enhance a team. And that's really what we're all trying to do. Again, back to what's our expectation. We all want a solid team. We all want the goal to be the same. We all want the work to be done in time, under budget, in a teamwork setting. So keeping those things in mind, that helps us know our people and know how to implement that delegation skill. Oswaldo, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Traci. It is just delightful to hear you talking about this, because it always is good to know when you have this level of mindset, when you have to lead an organization that is responsible for so many things in a company. And I believe that many of the participants in this webinar, they have the same level of responsibility you have. And the mindset, if the mindset of the leader, it is like that, understanding that we live in a fast-paced world, but it's worth it to make a pause, understand your team, your employees, and how you can mix and match versus the different activities you have. You can ensure that you're going to be successful not only professionally, but also personally, because there is nothing more something that I really enjoyed and everybody enjoys is like knowing that all others are being successful through your efforts of coordinating, delegating, directing, and motivating others. So thank you so much, Traci, for this. Now, this last slide, I want to talk in a very small way, kind of like the do's and don'ts of delegation. As we said during the prior slides, what we need to do, it is simple, is balance the responsibility and the capabilities. Could be a major project, a simple task, could be one person, could be too many, but at the end of the day, is the balance. There is a book named The Balancing Act. It's an old book that talks most about this, how leaders can practice this assessment to make the right balance. Second is manage risk. It's not always going to be perfect. There is going to be some level of failure. There is going to be some level of inefficiency. But manage the risk. You have to determine what are the things that you can afford to lose and which are the things that you cannot afford to lose. Third, be very clear on the expectations. There is nothing worse in delegating than not being clear what you're expecting of, either from a team or from an individual. It is okay, and actually, it is highly encouraged that after any meeting you have, any conversation, that you're delegating something, stop and say, was I clear? Do the expectation is clear? Can you please repeat to me the expectation? Because as humans, when we're getting something new to do, we start thinking in that minute how you're going to be doing it. And you may be losing details like timing, resources, key performance indicators. So it's highly recommended to, at the end of any conversation, rephrase the expectations and let that person that you're delegating to tell you what you're expecting. Another one I have seen in my job that sometimes poor managers or poor performers are in that position because of lack of resources. I've been asked to do this, but I don't have the right tools. And our industry, which is packed with humble people, hard workers, normally they don't raise a hand. They are go-getters. And they go and go-getter and go do it without asking or complaining. But we have to make sure that they have the right resources. Is the equipment working? Do you have the necessary knowledge? Do you have the proper certification to do it? Do you have the time available? Is this the right time to do it? There has to happen multiple questions before that happens in order to ensure success. And as Traci mentioned a couple of times, don't let performance be measured until the end. Monitor performance constantly. Some people might require more monitoring than others. As we said, maybe the most experienced with more knowledge, with better capabilities, it may not require that much of monitoring the performance. But the new ones, they surely will need it and they surely will appreciate it. We have to not confuse what micromanagement is to performance management. And performance management is one of our core responsibilities of any leader. The don'ts. And this goes very clear to one of the questions on the poll. Don't expect that all will perform the same level the way you do. It's very simple. You are where you are as a leader because your performance. That's the reason they pick you and choose you to be the leader. You can't expect people be you. They have different backgrounds, they have learned something different, they have different motivators. Sometimes they can be even better than you are if you just let them be them and provide them the right resources. So that's what it normally makes us be concerned about not delegating, because of course there is no one in this whole world is going to do your job the same way you do, because we all as human beings, we're totally different one to each other. So the next one is, as I said, don't wait until the end to measure performance, because that's going to be a failure, not only for whomever you delegated, but also for your role as a leader. And the other one, don't be too loose or too tight unless it's needed. Yes, in some cases, it is okay to micromanage when it's needed. And it's okay to be loose because this person does not need to be monitored. But most of the times we'll be in the middle. And we have to do this balancing act, of course, depending on how critical that task or the activity delegated is against that person who was delegated to. So this is a basic, very simple do's and don'ts, and I hope they are helpful for you to close this seminar. And just before going there and before going into the questions, we have our last poll. And the reason of this poll is to see if we need to do something else in this topic. Jonathan is it has this level of energy and passion for doing this, that this might give us the opportunity to identify what's next for all of you. So the three questions is, I still need more tools to delegate more. Some tools will help me delegate more. Or yes, the tool will help me delegate more.
All right, so good, Oswaldo. Let's see where everybody's at the end of our time here together today in the form of your presentation. How's everybody feeling about the value of what you shared today? Okay. There's still some people that say, I need more tools to delegate, and it is an ongoing process. I'm gonna guess you would agree with that. that we never become perfect at delegating. But many people say, hey, you know, some tools, I need some more still to help me delegate. About half the people have chosen B. About 15% with A, and 35% chose C.
Okay, so there's a good balance there.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. So now it's time for questions, and we have open questions. We have some minutes left of the webinar, and Traci and I were more than happy to answer those.
Yeah. Yeah, really great points, Traci. Great points, Oswaldo. Really appreciate you framing up the idea of delegation and sharing with us lots of great experiences and tools. So the questions were pouring in while you were talking, and you answered a few of them. And but we'll still take some time, and we'll respond to the ones that were already given. And if for all the participants, if you have questions, please type them into the question box in your control panel, and I'll be able to see them and help our presenters out. So Oswaldo and Traci, here's the first question, and it says, going back to the point of not wanting to delegate to other people because we're afraid they'll not be as good of a job, do as good of a job as we would. Mariah thinks of this as being like a student-teacher relationship, as if even if they don't do the task perfectly the first time, there are learning opportunities for everyone involved. And it's a chance for the teacher to explain small things, rules and such that may have been left out of the initial talk about expectations. And it's an opportunity for the student to learn the correct way, the way you'd want it to be done. Does this ring true for you? This kind of student-teacher relationship?
Oswaldo, may I take that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, go ahead.
That's a great question. I would say that in my experience, it comes down to really two key elements. And the first element is practice. The more I've delegated, the better I get at it. So you have to put if you're first uncomfortable with delegation, you have to enter that discomfort. And you're right, it is a teacher-student opportunity. However, I would question who's the teacher and who's the student sometimes in that situation. The second part of that is trust. That I think I mentioned that earlier, that we need to know our people, and they need to trust that if they fail, it's okay. And we have to trust that they are going to bring something better to the process than how it was handed to them. So I absolutely agree with the statement and the question.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So the student-teacher relationship, and I really like how you turned that around. Who's the student? Who's the teacher?
Something there, and that's great what you said, Traci. And I was thinking, and like myself being a teacher in a room and myself being a student in the room. But as a teacher, there is something that you must need to do, and it's observe. The observation capabilities, they have to be huge. And from my own personal experience on delegation, that's what I do a lot. I observe my direct reports a lot. And not in a bad way, I want to say. I mean, it's like the positive way is that how they struggle for some things, what they're passionate for things. And sometimes, even when I work in projects, I don't put them in boxes. I have one employee that works with me that he has this. It's amazing the way he manages himself in public, because number one, he even has a degree in arts or something like that. And when I started observing him, that he's not only good, but he really enjoyed it. In that moment, I decided myself to delegate him my presentations. Sounds ridiculous, but you know what? Sometimes I even struggle a lot because, I have language barriers. I overextend my information. I'm sometimes not very fun. But this guy is fantastic. So every time that I do it, he not only enjoyed it, and even for him has been learning experience, because in things that he's not necessarily a subject matter expert, but when I require him to do a presentation in public, he's like doing a performance show. He's like in Broadway. So, but that was the result of the observation. Until I was able, it maybe took me a while to identify that. So that's another one I wanted to add to Traci, and thank you for the question.
All right, and that's a really great outcome, that this delegation to this individual makes you look better, makes them look better, and it's better for the whole organization. So it's a great match, a great balance, and that's been a word you've used today, between identifying the right person for the right task. So here's another comment and question from Martha. It says, sometimes a middle manager is caught between wanting to promote those that they supervise and help them grow through delegation, but they're being held to a standard of perfection from their supervisor, from those above. How do you weigh this into your delegation decisions?
Well, that's surely a difficult situation. It's surely. And maybe one of the persons who had to understand a little bit more of delegation is the supervisor of the supervisor. Mm-hmm. Because you have to let the manager or the supervisor do their job. And the job is practically that, evaluating and allowing opportunities to get promoted. Perfection is a word that we all aspire to, but we should be able to control. Not everything can be perfect. And of course, based on one of the don'ts that I presented before, is do not expect that everyone is the same way you are, or is the same way to a role model, because realistically it's going to be difficult to achieve. Okay? So I think it's a little bit more of an exercise. If I am caught in between, in order to facilitate this exercise, I will use my energy to lower the expectations of my supervisor above, or manage the expectations different. I like to answer your questions when you're in HR and you're doing interviews for candidates. We like to have the Wonder Womans and the Supermans, okay? But I like to take and summarize in a few things that I will call the non-negotiables. And it's okay to listen to the supervisor and say, okay, tell me the list of all the competencies you need, but which ones are those three that are non-negotiable? And then that list is going to be reduced, and will help you minimize and reduce that perfection level.
Good. Right. So it's about perfection, making sure we're steering clear of that. And it's about managing the expectations of your supervisor when you're in the middle.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think it's about teamwork too, and communication. That's the responsibility of the manager in that place. And Martha, to me, the way I would handle that situation is I would communicate with my supervisor up front, saying, look, I have this potential employee that I'm trying to groom. We're going to work on this project, if you will, as a team, as a cross-functional group. And then I would keep in check with my supervisor how well that employee is performing, and that's communication both directions, because, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, the better work our employees do, the better reflection it is upon ourselves, and the better it is for the organization. That's part of your succession planning that we do.
And that's back to the expectations of delegation, is building a succession plan, better leaders, better performance in the organization. Great. That's really great comments. All right, so Brett, I think probably asking this question from some experience. He asks, how do we prevent ourselves from overloading the higher performing employees and burning them out?
Wow, you have that case, Tracy, you might want to share something, and I can share something.
Yeah, I think that's just really a great question, because it's the path of least resistance that we go to the person. That's the one I mentioned earlier of the learned behaviors versus the natural behaviors, that it's quicker, faster, but that really doesn't build a team, and that really doesn't grow all of our employees. And so it's a very thoughtful process in deciding how you're going to do that. And I think that's where you have to sit down the knowledge and the competencies. Say they don't have the experience, but back to what I mentioned earlier, look at people's competencies, and maybe you're looking at not your go-tos, and you look at them and you say, okay, so in our goals this year, this is an area that I want you to grow. And you set that expectation up front, and you give them the material to learn, you give them the support, you give them the time, which is so difficult for all of us, and you be that mentor. Because at the end of that, you may look and say, I had 2 top performers, and if you invest the time and energy and resources in these other employees, you may come back in a year or so and say, I actually now have 4. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to just use yourself as the mentor. Use your top performers as a mentor. That's that peer-to-peer mentorship that's so important. Divide that workload. It's not just you being the mentor, you being the delegator. Use your other employees to help you grow others.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And going, Jesus, that's a beautiful question, because for me, when you have a particular individual or a particular group that is overworked, overburdened, for me that's a red flag. And why I mean it's a red flag is because you are putting too much weight into a particular individual or group for other reasons. Might be planning, might be resources available, might be lack of a structure. So that there is a total imbalance between the resources and capabilities available for the job that need to be executed. So that might become above the delegation piece. It's like, do we have the right balance to execute? Number, if there is no way that I can run away from this commitment of executing this amount of tasks, now I might need different resources. Maybe I need to switch gears and resources. Maybe I need a different technology. Or maybe, you know what, I have 3 very good performers, and the other 7, one that maybe too junior, or might be too, they're not learning, they're not spacers. Maybe it is the right moment to, instead of moving from delegating into practically changing your structure as a leader. Again, delegation is only one of the tools of the leader. Mm-hmm. And if you feel comfortable that you're doing a right assessment while delegating, and you still having problems there, that's a red flag for something else happening around.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I do appreciate those comments, and I just wanted to pick up on Tracy's closing comment there, was delegating the mentoring. Even it's not just tasks. Sometimes it's the responsibility for, in this case, mentoring other employees. That it's not always task-based. It can be some of the other kinds of responsibilities that we have as people managers. So we've come up against the hour here, so we'll close up at this time. So I want to really thank Traci and thank Oswaldo from RiceTec for this very powerful presentation. And giving us the tools to help us become better delegators with the right purpose and the right expectations, taking the time to do it right. That is probably one of the most important skill sets, and emphasize that it's a skill set that we have as people managers. Okay. So I want to thank Traci and thank Oswaldo and thank all of the participants for their great questions. Apologize we weren't able to get to every one of them. But I want to say thank you for your interest and your active participation. And I want to let you know about our next webinar in the ASTA Tri-Societies Leadership Series, Taking It to the Next Level, is to get better feedback. And this webinar will be led by Carl Johnson of Syngenta. And this webinar will be held 1 month from today on May 17th at 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. Carl will be discussing how to get feedback and how to get better feedback that will improve your performance. And so until then, I want to say thank you to everyone.